Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Rock and Roll. We've got a great show lined up for you today. A couple of guests returning from last week, but at the same time, we have a brand new guest on our Sing Her Seat segment as well. We'll be featuring him on the guest spotlight, talking to Sudarshan Muthuthantri on exactly what we think players' futures are going to look like in the world of rugby. Also, a big shout out to Seat, Sri Lanka's #1 tyre brand with over 1.2 million tyres sold a year. German engineering trusted in over 110 countries and now powering our roads with real performance. Big respect to the Seat team. Thanks for being on the show. And of course, you can also catch us on the morning newspaper. Make sure you click on the QR code and watch the show, and you can read our column in the midweek papers as well.
Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tyres for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
Welcome to our In Control segment, brought to you by Seat, where we look at who was in control last week or who we think will be in control next week on this season of Rock and Roll. So this week, we're going to be looking at the fixtures and telling you who we think is going to be in control in those particular matches. If you're driving your family around, Seat Car Radials have you covered. Smooth, quiet rides and precise handling every time. Those specially designed sidewalls, game changer for comfort. Driving a BMW, Audi, Jeep or Merc, Seat's Europe range is made for you. Engineered and tested in Europe for ultimate grip and control from city roads to off-road terrain, Seat's got the right fit and keeps you in control. So on In Control this week, I'm not joined by anybody because my usual partner in crime, Abdullah Yusuf, is a little under the weather today, and he's been replaced by this wonderful Seat rugby ball on this wonderful Sing Her Seat as well. So we'll be talking to the Seat rugby ball, telling you what we think about the matchups that are coming up this weekend, who's going to be in control on the fixtures. Let's have a look at the matchups for this week, starting on the 6th of June. We have Royal taking on Thurston. Now, Thurston is one of the teams that has come into this A division. I think they're going to struggle a little bit against their neighbours, though, because Royal will want to make a statement. They will want to get their bonus point, and there are quite a bit of competition for places going on in that Royal College squad itself. So I'm sure there's quite a few guys who are coming up to the juniors and will want to make a good showing. So Thurston, I think, are going to struggle a little bit in this game. I would back Royal to win this one quite comfortably. The closest matchup of the season so far, I think, is going to be St. Anthony's taking on DS Seneca, because St. Anthony's are at home and DS will need to go up and make sure they put on a good show. They came into the quarterfinals, they kind of showed a little bit of promise against Royal, but they will want to make sure that they continue that. What DS haven't been able to do over the last couple of seasons is to play a full season well. They haven't been consistent. They've had some great matches, they've had some great moments in matches, but they haven't been able to really build their season. So early doors, let's see what DS have to do when they go up to St. Anthony's. St. Anthony's really struggling in that pre-quarterfinal loss to Trinity, but they've had a lot of time since then to work on, and their coaching staff, I have a lot of faith in them, and I think that's going to be something that is going to be a close game up there in Kandy. Zahira taking on Dharmaraja as well, two teams that are fairly evenly matched. Zahira probably the favorites in that one. They're the semi-finalists of the knockout tournament already. So I would think that they're the ones who are favorite in that game. But Dharmaraja, don't write them off. They've been steadily improving, and let's see what they have left over from last year as well. Sri Sumangala playing Trinity. Trinity obviously the favourites in that game, and you can bet your bottom dollar they will end up winning that match. But how much Sri Sumangala can run them close is something that we'll have to wait and see. And also for Trinity, probably the first time they're not going to have to travel down to Colombo to play a match. So they'll be very happy to play up there in their hometown. But I think that one is going to be all Trinity. And let's wait and see how many tries they run in, because they've not got a lot of tries under their belt. They've got a few individual tries under their belts, but not nice team constructed tries. Fazil Marija is going to want to use games like this against Sri Sumangala to try and get that cohesion among the backs, make sure the passing and the skill levels in the backs are executed as well as they could be. Then, of course, we move to the 7th of June, that's Saturday. We have St. Peter's taking on Ananda. Now, take nothing away from this Ananda side. They're a big set of boys, and they've got some wonderfully talented players in their back line as well. They've got a few injuries, and they've got a few players playing through injuries, but the fact remains that they have some individual talent that I think is second to none in any team in this A division segment. So make sure you watch out for this game, because St. Peter's, you remember, haven't played a lot of rugby already. And at this point in time, they are struggling because of some internal issues that they've had. They're going to be taking the field without their regular captain, a guy that they've been looking up to, a guy that would have been expected to score quite a few tries. So the coach, Sanat Martis, has to look for tries to come from somewhere else other than their now ex-captain. So this game, if Ananda were going into a game against anybody this weekend, this is the game they'd want to go into. Of course, St. Peter's may want to come out and say, look, we are a side that has dealt with everything. We are out there and we're going to smash everyone who comes up against us. That might be an attitude that they take as well. But that game, I think, St. Peter's versus Ananda, is going to be more interesting than a lot of us thought it was going to be. Wesley taking on Science. Science College also struggling with injuries, but again, some great individual talent. And they showed a little bit of promise against St. Thomas's in the knockout tournament. But I think Wesley might be a step too far for the Science College team. Wesley have been playing really well, and since their quarterfinal defeat, they look like they might, or semi-final defeat rather, they look like they might be the ones that, sorry, it was a quarterfinal defeat. They look like they might be one of the dark horses for this league title. Then we've got St. Thomas's taking on Kingswood. Now, I think this game is also going to be a little closer than most people expect it to be. Of course, St. Thomas's are at home, but that won't change the fact that Kingswood ran Royal really close in the knockout tournament, and they look a completely different side from the Kingswood team that we have been seeing over the last 3 or 4 years. They look like they mean business. They look like they've been well drilled. They look like they understand what they're trying to do with the personnel that they've got. So that's going to be a really interesting. St. Thomas's going down to a desperately difficult loss against Trinity. That would have hit them quite close to the chest, and I'm sure they're going to come back and try to respond from that. But it also will remain to be seen, did Anuranga Walpola and the rest of his coaching team take exactly what needed to be taken from that loss to Trinity, and have they worked on those issues, the very clear issues that needed to be worked on? We'll find out when they take on Kingswood. Vidyartha taking on St. Joseph's. St. Joseph's, I saw them training this morning and they looked very relaxed. They looked like they were a team who knew what they were about and looked well prepared. So I would worry if I were Vidyartha with St. Joseph's coming up to visit them. But Vidyartha were an outstanding team last year. I thought they were one of the teams that really showed a lot of promise, but just couldn't execute to the level that they were expected to. It was a long season, may suffered a few injuries, had some outstanding individual talented players in their team last year as well, some of them already in the Candy setup also. So Vidyartha versus St. Joseph's is going to be another really close game, I feel, and I think I would probably pick St. Joseph's for that one, but the hometown boys may surprise us all. Make sure you get on the predictions. And on the 8th of June, we have Isipathana taking on Mahanama. Now, this is going to be an interesting challenge for Danushka Boteju and his team. Do they play their full side, or do they rest a few players? They've been suffering with injuries, and they played some players who had to hide some injuries in that final as well. So are they going to take a step back, give their junior players a chance against this Mahanama outfit, who will, I think, struggle against the experience of this Isipathana team? Are they going to make sure that they give that first half to the juniors and bring their seniors on later. I think that might be the case, and if that is the case, maybe this scoreline won't be as one-sided as we expect it to be. But Isipatana will be the firm favourites to go out in that one. I don't see too many upsets in this first weekend, but we will have some close games.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tyres for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
So a brand new segment this year is the PodHub Matchup. This is where you get to predict who's going to be winning the games on every weekend. So we've already got several people who've predicted, thousands of them in fact, and we've got a bit of data for you on what the PodHub Matchup backend looks like. So the closest clash so far that people have predicted is Wesley versus St. Peter's. Now I'll almost split completely down the middle as to who is going to win that one. It's slightly in favor of St. Peter's at the moment, but Wesley College with a very strong showing. So we'll wait and see how that one turns out. So a lot of you, your 100,000 rupee jackpot could be affected by this match because it's just that close. And also the most one-sided games we have, we'll tell you what those are as we go along. But the fan favorite teams, those are the top engagement leaders. Isipatana, St. Peter's and Wesley are the ones with the most amount of votes, the most amount of predictions, the most amount of people backing them on PodHub Matchup. The strong contenders, Royal, Trinity and St. Thomas's, they're kind of there and thereabouts, and the people who need to actually get voting, making sure that they watch PodHub and watch the matchup, connect to the matchup and get their predictions in. They're the ones who support Zahira, St. Joseph's, Kingswood, DS, Senanayaka. These are the teams that need a little bit more of a strong showing. The talk of the town at the moment, the team with the highest engagement, the team, the hottest team that people seem to be talking about and a fan favorite, no surprises for guessing, already the knockout champions. They've got one trophy under their belt already, and that is Isipatana Vidyalaya, and they're the ones who are at the top of the fan engagement for this week so far. The underdogs who are in the spotlight though, Science College, Vidyartha, Zahira and DS, they will be strongly contending to get up there and make sure that their engagement matches the hot favorites as well. So the top 5 schools by predictor participation so far are going to be Isipatana, Wesley, St. Peter's, Trinity and Royal. That's not what I'm saying, that's what you guys are saying by going to podhubmatchup.com and making your predictions known. So at the moment, the predictions are favoring Isipatana to win it all, Wesley, St. Peter's, Trinity and Royal to come along in the other 4 places. So the top 10 schools by the predictor participation, St. Peter's, Wesley, Royal at the top, and then we have strong contenders Trinity, St. Thomas's and Isipatana, and we have Zahira, Kingswood, St. Joseph's, DS coming up out of 10, and that's in terms of predictor participation. So not who is going to win, but how many of you are participating in PodHub Matchup. So don't forget, get your predictions in on podhubmatchup.com. The deadline for predictions for this week, June 6th, 12 noon. So that's this Friday, 12 noon. You have to get your predictions in for the matchups of this week. We've talked about the matchups. You know exactly what we think, but what do you think? Put your money where your mouth is and make sure you actually do go in and predict on podhubmatchup.com. You can predict for this week's matches up till 12 noon on Friday the 6th of June, and next week's matches you can predict as long as you like as well. So podhubmatchup.com, we've got lots to bring you next week as well.
Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
This week we've got a brand new spanking guest for you, and we have Mr. Sudarshan Muthatantri, who is the General Secretary of the brand spanking new Players Association of Sri Lanka. We're going to be asking him what the future holds for Sri Lankan rugby players and what the association hopes to do to bring their welfare up to speed. That's on your Singer Seats Guest Spotlight. As we promised, former 7s and 15s captain of Sri Lanka, Mr. Sudarshana Muthutantri, in the studio with us, talking about his new role as the General Secretary of the Players Association of Sri Lanka. Muthu, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on board.
Congratulations for being appointed the General Secretary. Of course, you have Mr. Pavitra Fernando, who is your President, and Ashayan Kartelis, who is Vice President, if I'm not mistaken.
So we have Fasil Marija also in the board, and when we have so many past players who are influential, who have been influential in the game on the field. So now we have come forward and put our hands up to take on a role off the field to ensure the next generation of Sri Lanka rugby players are in great hands. So that's the objective of the overall committee.
Most people are not really familiar with what a Players Association or a Welfare Association does for professional sportsmen, Muthu. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so in general, this model is operational all over the world in professional sports. I know Sri Lanka rugby is not professional as that sorts, but there's nothing limiting us from having a player association. So what a player association basically does is make sure a player is well taken care of while he's playing. So for example, maybe insurance policies, maybe after maybe setting up these players for life after rugby. So something like a career mentorship, maybe getting the education on board while they are doing rugby on the field. They have to fall back on something after they retire as well. So maybe preparing them for that. Also maybe player psychology and maybe those kind of aspects where we come into play with, where professionals in the modern era are taking it very seriously when it comes to psychology. Player welfare is a big part of associations around the globe, and so in the future we also hope to tie up with Sri Lanka rugby as a whole, and to ensure that we are a part of the entire program and we play a big role in that, and also make sure that we put our hands up for the world representation for player associations in rugby as well.
Muthu, you've played in school, you've transitioned to club rugby, and then you went on to national rugby. So you've seen the whole spectrum of rugby players, and people drop out at each different stage. And then you've also seen your friends, your colleagues who've gone on and retired from rugby, like yourself now, and you're obviously working at a big corporate, but some people don't have that luxury. They may not have the educational qualifications. What does your experience as a rugby player through those stages, what does that bring to the association? Where do you think the most pressing needs are?
Yeah, so right now what we have identified for players in terms of personal experience and the way I have related to the rugby side of things, I think the balance should be brought in to the game, to the sport. We can't have players only playing rugby right after school and just focusing on that, because our platforms are not made for that at the moment, because we are not full-time professional rugby players at the moment who are currently engaged in the sport. So it is important, in my perspective, that these guys have a balance and they bring something to the table and they look forward to the future and they prepare themselves as well to make sure that they have another option like after they play the sport. So basically rugby is a very tough sport, as you may know already. So a chance of a player getting injured and career-ending injuries are always a fact in the sport as well. So we want to ensure that these players, and in my perspective, there should be a positive balance, and I think that will also help players also to perform on the field better as well, because they have things outside of rugby happening for them in that space.
Muthu, you last played for St. Thomas's, many years ago, almost 15 years ago, I think. I can't even believe time has gone that quickly. But do you see that rugby in school has got a little bit more professionalized than when you played?
You can actually see that from the performances of the junior national teams. So basically, when you compare around Asia, we have a school setup is pretty much professional now, and people are pushing athletes to win at any cost. Mentality is that is there. But in return, what we are seeing that is when you transfer that into the junior nationals, immediately the under 18 platforms, the under 16, under 20s, our guys go and perform very well. But then the drawback to it is when you go into clubs after that, it becomes automatically a semi-professional kind of a approach, where that same facilities that schools have, some clubs do not have that, except for a few clubs. So you don't get the maximum potential benefit out of these players who just come out of school and go into club. Obviously then the next stage is senior level, where the transition does not take place smoothly, I would suppose. And I think there are good examples that you may see from my time, where we had likes of Shenal Dias and all those international caliber players who just came out of school, like high caliber players, but I don't think they reached their maximum potential in that international level. I think you can't, because the structure is not in place for that to happen, and I think players are forced to look at career opportunities and obviously a second option after rugby soon, because if you don't, it's not a professional kind of a setup where you can solely rely on the sport itself to set you up for the future.
You talked about the Players Association being something mainly with regard to professional players, but obviously you want to be talking to the younger generation. What plans do you have of mixing with the schoolboy ruggerites, or maybe even officially partnering with the schools rugby federation, speaking to parents, telling them that you know this is not the be all and end all, you've got to give your kids an education? Are there plans for that?
Yes, so what I basically want to do is basically get all these universities programs on board our association. So basically there's nothing stopping us from going and talking to universities in Sri Lanka, maybe not abroad initially, but we'll talk about the local available education options for these players and maybe get them scholarships, maybe highlight the best possible players. But at the end of the day, it has to scale as well, so it has a financial thing that we have to also look forward to. But we want to give as much as possible to the junior rugby players you get some great players, like for the last few years you had some awesome players coming out of the school system, but necessarily not being highlighted at the club level, and also we don't see them after schools, they just disappear. So we don't want that to happen basically. So we want these institutes to come on board, offer them scholarships, maybe get them on board for their degree programs maybe, and then obviously the insurance aspect of it comes. Then in terms of rugby as a whole, we want to see these guys go abroad, maybe play for junior clubs in those countries, because I know that there are opportunities available in the likes of like countries like New Zealand, England. There are plenty of clubs where our guys can go and play. So I think those opportunities can be interlinked with the junior program, and that may be a good transition as a whole, as a holistic player, to transition from school rugby, come into club rugby, and then maybe going on to represent in the national team.
Well, that's fantastic. And any parents who are watching, any young players who are watching, there certainly does seem to be a pathway that the Players Association is thinking about. So that's great, Sudarshan. It's been a long time coming, this Players Association. So congratulations and all the best to you and your committee. And of course, Pavitra, who's unable to be with us today, for taking this program forward. I think it's a really long overdue aspect in Sri Lanka rugby. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And big thanks also to Singer Furniture, Sri Lanka's trusted name in handcrafted solid wood elegance. Whether it's your living room, office or dining space, Singer brings timeless design and durability to every piece.
Some things are meant to be felt, not just seen good. At Singer, every curve, every detail is an invitation to experience craftsmanship that transcends time. Crafted with absolute love, from materials chosen for their grace and designed to complement the art of living well. Your home is a reflection of your story. Singer is there in the quiet moments and the lasting memories. Built to endure. As time passes, they even feel more closer to you. Quiet luxury, lasting craftsmanship for a stylish lifestyle. Singer Furniture.
Lots of new stuff on board on season 2 of Rock and Roll, and one of those is a recovery room. And we're very privileged to have with us Shafin Majid, who is a consultant physio to many school and club teams. I won't run into all of them, but he is the guy who helps make players available, make sure that they're kept healthy, not just for the season, but right throughout their lives as well. That's something that physios keep in mind. Shafin, thanks again for joining us on the show. Let's talk today about injury prevention. We talked about preseason last week, and we'll talk about injury prevention, but you can't really prevent injuries, can you, in a game like rugby?
You can't prevent injuries as a whole, but we do categorize injuries into two parts, that is preventable injuries and unpreventable injuries. So preventable injuries, you would have certain things like overuse injuries, where we can monitor training loads and training intensities to reduce those injuries. But then we have preventable injuries, which involves a lot of the non-preventable injuries are the ones which you face on field during practice in contact sessions, and you have those freak accidents where you break your leg or have an ACL injury.
Sure.
Yeah.
So an ACL injury, that's an interesting one. So is that a preventable or a non-preventable?
It is hard to say whether it is a preventable injury, because we can prevent to a certain extent, but then there are people who have done everything right in terms of sleep, nutrition, rehab, prehab, strength and conditioning, who have ACL injuries as well.
Right.
But the likelihood of having an ACL reduced drastically if you do those steps correctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about rehab and prehab, Majid. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the difference is between those two?
So rehab is mainly getting back to sport after an injury. It not only is exercise, but it is everything else that is put into in terms of the nutrition, sleep again, as well as the psychology. You have to get players mentally ready to get back out of the field. So that is a part of rehab as well. Then we have prehab, which is done to mainly prevent injuries. So we use the word prehab for most of the time is for exercises. So that would be a lot of exercises that we focus on specific joints or in compound movements to prevent those injuries from happening during play or during your training times. Yeah.
Right. So that also targets injured players, make sure that they get their specific work done so that they don't have a recurrence of the injury. But who actually makes sure that gets done, Majid? Because you're not there 24/7. So how does that protocol work?
So the prehab and the rehab is a collaborative approach. So as a team, as the player, the strength and conditioning coach, as well as the physio. So the physio would ideally lay out the plan, give them the plan that they are not supposed to work on in terms of the exercises. The strength and conditioning coach will just overlook that happening at the gym or before the gym, or try to alter those exercises that you would usually do at the gym with a separate exercise, so that it doesn't put too much force to cause any further injury. So it's more of a team game. Yeah. So me, the player, as well as the strength and conditioning coach.
Let's talk about the players. They're young guys, they're desperate to play. What is their response to having to do this kind of boring stuff, repetitive stuff, Majid? How do they respond to your instructions?
Yeah. So to be honest, personally, coming into one of the top schools in the country as a new physio, getting the rehab part in is something totally new to them, as well as the coaches. So my job was to first initiate the culture of doing the rehab. So now it has come to a point where people see the value of doing the rehab. So if the seniors do it, the juniors will fall in line. Usually that is the case.
Right.
So then my whole point is for players as well is to trust the player, trust the process, as well as have short-term targets rather than just going back to sport from 0 to 100, right? So first step is to if you can't walk, get back to walking, get back to jogging, get back to running. So setting those short-term goals for the player is going to be helpful with helping them push one step at a time.
And let's talk about the junior players. A lot of the time they might be the ones who get some serious injury which might not make them continue rugby. So how do we prevent stuff happening at 14, 16, 18 stages?
Yeah, so very early adolescent kids, so under 14 to under 16 are the most likely to have a fracture, which is a very nasty injury to have, and it's more scary if your limb is halfway broken. But we try to prevent those mainly through coaching techniques. So that is most of the time is up to the coaches to teach those young players who are grooming or preparing for hard contact, to teach them how to fall, to teach them how to place a ball, to teach them how to tackle safely. That is the most important thing, not just going 100% or full on, trying to get the other person onto the ground, but it is the player's responsibility or other tackler's responsibility to tackle the opposite player safely. That is something that we don't instill in our young guys' heads as well. Yeah.
So you must be a bit of a pain, Majid, walking around the practice sessions. You're telling the coach, hang on, can we do this a little bit more safely? Or telling the S&C coach, look, I don't think you're getting enough prehab in for this bunch of guys. You might be telling, a whole bunch of people different. You might be telling the players, look, sorry, you're not ready to play. You can't play this game. So how does that work with your popularity around the field? It must be a tough job.
Yes, so I feel like as a physio, it's a matter of building the trust. So trust in what you do, as well as building trust amongst the players as well as the coaches. Be honest with the players. Sometimes you have to be brutally honest sometimes, saying that, okay, you can't play this game. And then what are you going to do during that period of not being able to train? And then giving them step-by-step guidelines. That's why mentioned before, those short-term goals are the most important for a player's perspective. So give them short-term goals to achieve. Say if you achieve this thing, you can go to the next stage, which is this. So give those short-term goals, and then they will achieve that from their end. And in the coach's perspective, obviously in season it's very hard to control. The best player always has to play, right? So in our point of view, we try to keep them as safe as possible on the field. So if we notice, okay, this player is limping a bit too hard, then he's definitely out, and it's sometimes our responsibility to keep the players safe, even if the coach gets mad at us.
Yeah, it's just part of the job, and Majid is telling us exactly what we need to do to be prepared for a long-term rugby career if we can. We've seen several players who have played many years, from the time that they were maybe 10, 12 years old to the time they're 32, 34, 35. Some players even continue close to 40. So if you want to make sure that you keep your body safe and able to play rugby for a long time, then having a good trusted physio on speed dial is probably one of those things that you should think about. Majid, we thank you very much for coming in again, and we'll speak a lot more about maybe specific injuries, how to prevent them, and how to recover from them as we go along on the season.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hearts racing fast, we feel alive. For miles and miles, let your spirit fly. There's no turning back, the road is yours.
German-engineered tyres for Sri Lankan roads. Seat Car Radials. The road is yours.
Well, that's our show, episode 2 of season 2 of Rock and Roll. We hope you enjoyed it. Many thanks to our guests for coming in, and of course making sure that we are kept informed of everything that's going on, not just in schools rugby, but in rugby in Sri Lanka. And also a huge thank you to our sponsors, SEAT, for keeping us in control in the studio and of course on the roads, Singer Seats for these wonderful chairs, and of course the Daily Morning, which publishes our column on Rock and Roll in the morning. So make sure you read that, scan the QR code, which takes you right to the show. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. My name is Shanaka. Until then, have a great rugby weekend.